Hi, I'm David, and welcome back to COC. Today we're going to talk about consecrated or monastic life. Rooted in the Bible, where Jesus calls his followers to detachment from the world and radical discipleship. Consecrated or monastic life represents one of the most profound expressions of devotion to God. While all Christians, including you and I, are called to a life of holiness, some are called to more. In fact, individuals who embrace consecrated or monastic life are sometimes described as the special forces of the church. Not because they're spiritually inferior, but because they voluntarily submit themselves to a stricter life of discipline, obedience, and sacrifice that most people are either unable or unwilling to live. Consecrated or monastic life is not an escape from the world, nor is it a romantic retreat into quiet reflection. It is intentionally more difficult. In fact, some individuals, such as monks and nuns, structure their entire day around prayer, often rising between 3 and 5 in the morning, returning repeatedly for communal prayer throughout the day, engaging in manual labor, fasting regularly, and observing long periods of silence. Even their clothing reflects this radical commitment. The religious habit, typically simple, uniform, and historically made of rough or plain fabric, served as a visible sign of humility, poverty, and separation from worldly status. The origins of consecrated or monastic life go all the way back to the earliest days of the faith. In the 3rd and 4th centuries, as widespread persecution started to wane for the most part, many Christians tried to find a new way to give their lives up completely to God. Inspired by the teachings of Jesus, they withdrew into the deserts of Egypt, Palestine, and Syria. These individuals, known as desert fathers and mothers, included saints like St. Anthony and St. Pachomius, and embraced extreme asceticism. Their way of life came to be known as white martyrdom, a bloodless but total sacrifice in which they died daily to the world in order to live completely for God. This was not metaphorical or symbolic. Their routines were harsh, their diets were minimal, their sleep was limited, and their whole lives were marked by constant spiritual warfare. Over time, this solitary way of life developed into organized communities, monastic and religious orders, and gave rise to convents and monasteries, where discipline was shared, prayer was structured, and obedience was practiced communally. Not all orders lived the same way, but certain saints, including St. Basil and St. Benedict, created rules for some of them that provided a balanced but still demanding rhythm of prayer, work, and communal living. Over the next several hundred years, more monastic and religious orders emerged, and they combined activism and contemplation, bringing consecrated and monastic life out of the cloister in the desert and directly into society by preaching, teaching, caring for the sick, and helping the poor. They also have preserved the Bible and other writings regarding philosophy, law, literature, and science during the so-called Dark Ages. As I always like to do when it's necessary, let's start by defining our terms. What is consecrated or monastic life? Well, in order to answer this question, we have to look at it from 3 different perspectives. As I've mentioned numerous times on this channel before, there are 3 major branches of the Christian faith: Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, and Protestant. And they all 3 look at this a little bit differently. In the Orthodox Church, monastic life is essentially the only form of consecrated vocation, and it consists of monks and nuns. In Protestant churches, most Protestants actually don't practice monastic life, but there are a few who do, mainly within Anglicanism and to a lesser extent, Lutherans and Methodists as well. These communities often include monks and nuns and religious brothers and sisters, and they can vary widely. In the Catholic Church, monastic life is actually one expression within a broader vocation known as consecrated life. Consecrated life includes monks and nuns, but it also includes friars, religious brothers and sisters, and others. In other words, monastic life is within consecrated life in the Catholic Church. So, since all 3 of the major branches of the faith look at consecrated or monastic life differently, let's look at them all individually. First, Eastern Orthodox. In the Orthodox Church, monastic life is understood as a mystical path to theosis, or union with God, and it stands at the very heart of Orthodox spirituality. Orthodox monastics consist of monks and nuns who formally renounce worldly attachments through vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, and offer their lives as a continual sacrifice for their salvation and for the salvation of the world. Monastic life takes several traditional forms: anchoritic or hermetic, cenobitic or communal, and skeet. Hermetic monks and nuns withdraw into near total solitude and embrace intense fasting, silence, and unceasing prayer. Cenobitic monastics live together under an abbot or an abbess and follow a demanding daily rhythm of prayer, fasting, manual labor, and liturgical worship that shapes every single hour of the day. Skeet monasticism represents a middle way between these two. Monks and nuns live in small, loosely organized communities that balance solitude with regular communal prayer. Orthodox monastic commitment unfolds in 3 stages: the novice, the lesser schema, and the great schema, the highest stage of all. Central to Orthodox monasticism is the practice of hesychasm, especially through the continual repetition of the Jesus prayer, which seeks direct communion with God, inner stillness, and purification of the heart. Nowhere is Orthodox monasticism more visibly embodied than on Mount Athos in Greece, the ancient monastic republic often called the Holy Mountain, which has served as a spiritual beacon of orthodoxy for over 1,000 years. In fact, from Mount Athos and other places throughout the world, countless saints and other holy men and women have emerged, to whom numerous miracles have been attributed. Next, Protestants. In Protestant churches, most Protestants don't even use the term monastic life. In fact, after the Reformation, most Protestant churches almost rejected it completely, which is kind of weird because Martin Luther was a monk, and emphasized justification by faith alone and the priesthood of all believers, not just a select few. Many of the early reformers criticized monasticism because they felt that it was tied to work-based merit, and it kind of created a spiritually superior class of Christians. Not to mention the fact that it also seemed to go against Jesus' command to be in the world, but not of the world. Nevertheless, a few churches, like I mentioned earlier, mainly Lutheran, Anglican, and Methodist, have preserved some form of monastic life. In fact, monastic life has actually seen somewhat of a revival among some Protestants within the last 100 years or so. But it's not quite as institutionalized or structured as Catholics and Orthodox, and it's sometimes called evangelical monasticism or new monasticism. Anyway, Lutheran and Methodist monastics consist of monks and nuns, sometimes called deaconesses or sisters, who take vows and live their lives in religious orders or other communal living arrangements, and focus on prayer, service, study, and spiritual discipline, but without living in cloister communities or hermitages. Anglican monastics consist of monks and nuns who also take vows and also live in religious orders, and dedicate themselves to things like education, healthcare, social work, and missionary activity. Some of their communities are cloistered, and some are not. But bottom line, when it comes to Protestants, aside from some Lutherans, Anglicans, and Methodists, most view any form of monastic life as a personal decision in their everyday lives, rather than as a special vocation. Lastly, Catholic. In the Catholic Church, as I mentioned earlier, monastic life is part of a broader vocation called consecrated life. Consecrated life consists of monks, nuns, friars, religious brothers and sisters, and others, and it can be divided into 5 major categories: religious institutes, secular institutes, societies of apostolic life, hermits, and consecrated virgins and widows. What's the difference, you ask? Well, first, religious institutes include a wide variety of communities traditionally organized into first, second, and third orders. These consist of monks and nuns in religious orders like the Benedictines, Carthusians, Carmelites, Dominicans, Franciscans, and Poor Clares. Like Orthodox monastics, they take the evangelical counsels or vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, live in anchoritic or cenobitic communities dedicated to a specific charism, and go through 3 different stages of commitment or spiritual growth, commonly known as novitiate, first vows, final or perpetual vows, and others. Religious institutes also include clerical and mendicant forms, and canons regular and clerks regular. Next are secular institutes, which consist of consecrated lay men and women, and sometimes clergy, who also take the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, but instead of living in cloister communities or hermitages, they remain fully immersed in secular environments and professions, witnessing to holiness from within the world. Next are societies of apostolic life, which consist of religious brothers and sisters who normally don't take vows and may or may not live in cloister communities or hermitages, but they pursue a common mission. Next are hermits, individuals who dedicate themselves to God in solitude, penance, and prayer. And lastly are consecrated virgins and widows, individuals who dedicate themselves to God in prayer, service, and fidelity to their state of life. Also, like the Orthodox, countless saints and other holy men and women have emerged who have had miracles attributed to them. One other thing to mention here, there are actually several other Catholic spiritualities that are considered consecrated life. Associations like the Benedictine Oblates, Legion of Mary, and Opus Dei, but that's a whole other video, maybe one of these days. Consecrated or monastic life remains one of the faith's clearest and most enduring witnesses to the kingdom of God. For centuries, men and women have freely renounced ordinary patterns of life to devote themselves radically to discipline, obedience, and sacrifice. Whether expressed through monks and nuns in cloister communities or hermitages, friars in active ministry, or ordinary laity in their everyday lives, consecrated or monastic life proclaims the gospel truth that transcends time, that God is worthy of everything we have and everything we are. Far from being an escape from the world, consecrated or monastic life represents a deeper engagement with it. And far from being about hating one's own body or rejecting creation, consecrated or monastic life is about retraining the will and reordering one's love towards God. Consecrated or monastic life is not commanded of all Christians, but it's freely embraced by those who believe God is calling them to do it. I hope you enjoyed this, because that's all I've got for now. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Stay faithful, stay devoted, and stay convinced of Christianity.